Greetings, everybody! I am the Starving Martian, and welcome to Thought Bubbles, where I share my thoughts on some random comic books yanked out of my collection. And today, we're going to be talking Bat-Mite. The character of Bat-Mite has seen a surge of popularity in recent years. He's had his own miniseries. He's had appearances in mainstream Batman comics. He appeared in a few episodes of Batman Brave and the Bold. And, he's become something of a fan favorite, but that was not always the case. Bat-Mite first appeared in the 1950s in Batman and Detective Comics, and he was a mischievous little imp from another dimension with magical powers who was Batman's biggest fan, and he would come over into our world and harass Batman and create all sorts of wacky scenarios for Batman to get involved in because he just loved seeing Batman in action. Eventually, he would become rolled over into what was, at the time, the Batman family, consisting of Batman and Robin and Batwoman and Batgirl and Ace the Bat-Hound. But by the 1960s, the comic books were ready for a change. Ironically, as the TV show debuted, making the campy Batman more popular than ever, the comic books were becoming more serious. Batman got a new, more realistic look, and the Bat-Hound and the Bat family were all swept to the side, and Bat-Mite went with them. And so Bat-Mite wasn't seen in the comic books for years. He would appear in a cartoon. There was a cartoon in the 70s starring Adam West and Burt Ward as the voices of Batman and Robin, and that featured a new version of Bat-Mite who was pretty much like the old one except green for some reason. Anywho, but Bat-Mite in the comic books he retired for a while, and he would not be brought back until 1992 in the pages of Batman Legends of the Dark Knight. This is issue number 38, Legends of the Dark Mite, written by Alan Grant and with art by Keven O'Neill. And as you can tell, this is not your father's Bat-Mite. This is Bat-Mite Extreme. Alright, so, this is an interesting little story. I read this one as a kid and very much enjoyed it. But this was, for a lot of people, their introduction to Bat-Mite. I had already read a big hardcover book that I found in the library with a collection of stories from the 50s and 60s, so I was familiar with Bat-Mite. So, this wasn't how I first met the character, but it did kind of blow my mind because you're not used to seeing Bat-Mite as this kind of giant vampire monster looking thing. But let's get down into it. The story focuses around a gentleman by the name of Bob Overdog. Bob Overdog is he's scum. He's this 2-bit hood and junkie, and he's part of this crew that kills and tortures and downs whatever medicinal products they could find. And as the story opens, he's already been captured and Batman's interrogating him. Seems there's some loose threads in the case that Batman feels he might be able to shed some light on. So this is Mr. Overdog here. You'll notice his headband with the lightning bolt on it. That lightning bolt is the exact same as the symbol on the front of Bat-Mite's outfit. So the idea here is that this is a world wherein Batman has never met Bat-Mite. This is the first time Bat-Mite will ever be mentioned. And it's unclear if this was ever supposed to be part of continuity because many of the Legends of the Dark Knight stories are in their own little universe. But the idea here is that Bat-Mite has never existed before. And we don't know by the end of the comic whether Bat-Mite even exists in the context of this story or not. So we see in this flashback Bob Overdog here. Him and his crew have tortured this guy for info, and they're celebrating with a little drug party when Batman shows up, and everybody's running for themselves. And as Joe's trying to get away, he stumbles into Bat-Mite. Now, every time that Joe sees Bat-Mite, he's high. He's high on something. So we don't know. does Bat-Mite exist or not? Does he only see him because he's on, like, do you need to be high on something to see Bat-Mite? Is he hallucinating the whole thing, or is Bat-Mite real? There's evidence both ways in the comic, which is pretty cool. It allows you to judge for yourselves. If you like Bat-Mite as a character, if you want him to be part of Batman's mythos, then you could say yes, he's a real character. He just chose to appear to this Overdog guy. If, however, you don't like Bat-Mite as a character, if you think it's too funny, too silly, doesn't match the Dark Knight aesthetic, then no, it's just a hallucination this guy has when he's on drugs. And it works perfectly fine either way. So Bat-Mite encounters this guy who thinks he's a bit of a joke, but bullets fly right through him, and there doesn't seem to be anything Bob can do. Anywho, Bat-Mite meets up with the rest of Joe's crew, who also try to kill him. That makes him mad, and apparently you don't want to get Bat-Mite mad. He morphs into this hellish bat creature beast thing, and proceeds to kill them all in horribly graphic ways. For me as a kid reading this just blew my mind. You didn't expect this out of Batman comics in general, although the Legends of the Dark Knight series didn't tend to carry the Comics Code Authority stamp, so they could get away with some stuff. But you certainly weren't expecting this out of Bat-Mite. He chops this guy's head off. He electrocutes this one's brain. He shoots a hole in that guy's chest. This poor sap gets some dynamite crammed into his mouth, which looks extremely painful. And then, boom! His brains shoot out of his head, and his flames engulf the rest of him. Yeah. Bat-Mite would have fit right in with the Martians from Mars attacks. Now, is Bat-Mite doing any of this is actually a question that'll come up. Batman says that when they found these guys' bodies, that they were all shot to death, and that the bullets came from Bob Overdog's gun. In the follow-up story, and yes, there is a follow-up story, Bat-Mite claims that the crimes were all his own, Bob Overdog. The crimes were all his, and that Bat-Mite was only the catalyst. Exactly what that means is open for interpretation, as much of this book is. And I love this picture of Bat-Mite just standing there after the destruction. So Overdog tries to do him in once again. Once again, his gun proves useless. This time the bullets turn into flowers. And Bat-Mite takes him on a little journey. He brings him into his dimension. And this is where we get to see the Mite dimension in all of its glory. And so we see there's Mite versions of Robin, there's Mite versions of Two-Face, Catwoman, Joker, Penguin. And then apparently the Mites just enjoy watching the Earth heroes and villains and picking their favorites and dressing up like them and running out and having a good old time. And here we see some Mite versions of the rest of the DC Universe circa 1992. And right there in the corner is Mr. Mxyzptlk. And yes, I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, but I'm convinced there is no proper way to pronounce it. Correct me if you like, but any name without a vowels, you're just not going to pronounce right. And we're going to see these guys some more in the sequel story. So it's interesting. I don't think this was ever really made a point of in the original comics back in the 50s. That there are other Mites in the Mite universe that also enjoy disguising themselves. Come on. The page wants to stick together. There we are. So Bat-Mite shows Bob how he helped Batman out a bit during the scuffle. by having this piano chase a guy. And this is actually what brings Batman to talk to Bob in the first place, because a piano rolled uphill on its own, and pianos generally don't do that. It's one of those things that might make you think maybe Bat-Mite's real, because that is left as a bit of a mystery at the end of the day. How did the piano roll uphill? Bat-Mite then brings Bob to another window. He's kind of playing the Ghost of Christmas Past here, and Christmas Future and Present all in one. He shows Bob the widows and the orphans that he's created through his murder sprees. He shows him that life is a tiny, fragile flower. It needed love, nurture, care, yet I'd spent almost all my years hating it. And he asks, why? Why are you doing this to me? Who are you? At which point Bat-Mite reveals himself as God. Or a god. Or I don't even know. And honestly, I don't know which version of Bat-Mite is odder, stranger, the monster demon Bat-Mite or the kind, benevolent, loving god Bat-Mite. But whatever it is, seeing Bat-Mite in his god form breaks Overdog down, and he's sorry for his entire life, and he would take it all back if he could, and he'll never hurt anyone again. So we conclude in Arkham Asylum, where Batman is leaving. He hasn't really learned anything that he didn't know before. He cannot obviously corroborate Overdog's story. Overdog's insisting that he's not crazy, but it certainly sounds it. Batman has a quick conversation with Gordon, hops into the most impractical Batmobile I have ever seen, and I've seen a lot of Batmobiles in my time, but seriously, how could you steer this thing? And we end with Overdog in Arkham getting a visit by Bat-Mite, who refuses to tell anyone that he's real and prove Overdog's sanity. And Overdog is sedated, screaming that he's not mad. And again, how many times has he been sedated? What kind of drugs is he on in the asylum? You know, one could say, oh, Batman has to be real because he's not on any dope now, but obviously he is. It's just, state authorized dope. And so we end with a shot of Bat-Mite on Batman's heels. Of course, Batman doesn't see him. And the end. So this was a very unique, very interesting take on the Bat-Mite character. And I think it was a good move bringing Bat-Mite into modern comics. And I do like the way that it leaves it open-ended. If you like Bat-Mite, he's real. If you don't like Bat-Mite, he's not. Now, there was a follow-up comic, as I've mentioned. We're going to take a look at it maybe in a week or two. Let me just show off the cover really quick. It is Mitefall. Yes, pretty much a parody of sorts of the Nightfall storyline. It is in some ways a better Bat-Mite story. It's a more traditional look at Bat-Mite, but yet I think a weaker comic overall, but it's by the same creative team. So we'll take a look at that before too long. But so let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think of this take on Bat-Mite. Do you know the character from anything else? And if so, what is your favorite version of Bat-Mite? So this has been the Starving Martian, taking a look at a very, very, very bizarre version of a character beloved by some, hated by others. And we'll catch up with you next time. But until then, as I always say, keep watching the skies. Later, guys.